Well, Bill, Project Veritas finally got to my old media ownership company, Tegna, which is why I was like, I got to talk about this because actually, not too long ago, I had Christian Watson on, a journalism student, to talk about what I believe is the very training that Project Veritas has this whistleblower exposing in the video. And so we were talking, I got the whole training sent to me, and I can show it. I'll show the video that Christian and I did, just a quick snippet of it in a second. But let's take a quick look for everybody who's unfamiliar. Let's watch the beginning of this in case people are not familiar with the one and only Bill Doris. Bill also used to work in TV news like me. So let's take a listen.
I don't want to destroy the news. I don't want anybody to get fired. I want people to change and realize that they are supposed to be objective.
I challenge you to stop thinking in terms of objective journalism, and we'll discuss why that's not really feasible anymore.
I don't really care if people trust us or not. You still got to do your job. So, I mean, that's the least of my concerns, whether they trust me or not.
Objectivity and trust are two of the cornerstones of journalism. But inside one of the nation's largest media companies, writers, producers, editors, reporters, and anchors are literally being trained to not be objective. And in the words of that news anchor from Houston, they do not care if they lose your trust.
Wouldn't they want to be trusted?
To me, that seems like that's part of the job, that you need trust to be able to do your job.
Okay, Bill, I want to stop right there. So obviously, the main issues in this video, and people can go watch it for themselves on Project Veritas page, I only want to play a little bit of it for copyright reasons and everything, is this idea of objectivity and also trust. But the training, if I understand it correctly, is like diversity, equity, and inclusion training. Is that what you understood this to be? And this is out of San Antonio's CBS affiliate, but it's owned by Tegna. So it should be clear that when Project Veritas titles their video CBS Insider, he's not a CBS insider. He's a Tegna insider, and they are a CBS affiliate. And the reason that matters is because CBS has its own corporate way of doing things, but they're not the ones that are the corporation influencing the station. It's Tegna, which is a local news ownership company. Right. Bill, would you like to just give us your opening thoughts?
I think the first thing, it's important to note, and it says right here in the video, that this insider, whistleblower, whatever you want to call him, he's actually a promotions person. And for those of you that don't know, promotions and news, they really don't have a whole lot to do with each other on an interpersonal level. Most of the time, they get together on sweeps pieces. How do we promote this sweeps piece? Here's what I've wrote. Okay, give me the video. I'll edit something, have it for you by the end of the week. And that's usually about the extent of it. So, but it's important to note that because this is not a news guy, this is a promotions guy. So that's important to keep in mind. But when, as a promotions producer, why didn't he use the line where, the most trusted name in news? I mean, seriously, that, TV stations around the country have been using that for years. We're the tri-state area's most trusted news source, or we're California's most trusted news source. As a promotions guy, I kind of expected him to drop that. But, trust, if you don't care if they trust you, then they're not going to watch you and you're not going to have a job. That's, obviously the big one. On a personal level, this hurt my heart. And I know a lot of people are going to hear that and they're going, well, you left the business. Yeah. Well, I was married to my ex-wife for 7 years. I still care about her. This is the same thing here. I love journalism. I'm still a news junkie. I mean, injected into my veins, but I couldn't deal with the BS anymore. And to hear a news anchor who's dedicated probably the good portion of his adult life to this industry, no, I don't care if they trust me, then why even do it? Why are you even here? You're just here to get a paycheck at this point. And I was really sad. I thought I would be angry, but no, I'm so sad about what it has become, and that people in journalism, people in news, there's no more journalism. This was the nail in the coffin. But people in news actually feel this way, and that's a damn shame.
Are you talking specifically about the anchor who said,
Yes.
I don't really care if people trust us? Okay.
Yeah.
So my 2 cents on the trust thing is, number one, I actually do not think you should trust the news. I don't really, I don't know if I think you should trust any sort of just institution wholeheartedly, like you never question
Right.
it. Let me look up the definition of trust, okay? As long as I'm talking about it, I'm just gonna look up, even though I don't even trust Merriam-Webster.
Right.
But the way that they define it is, because they now say you're an anti-vaxxer if you're against mandates. They've now expanded the definition. So why am I reading them when I'm telling you not to trust, and I don't trust Merriam-Webster? Obviously, I'm insane. But their definition is a firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something. Which probably that's the main definition. Okay. Firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something. Yeah, I would throw trust out the window. I think you should take it for what it's worth to you and question it. That goes for what I do on my channel. That goes for mainstream media. That goes for your doctor, I think. I think it goes for public health officials. I think it goes for the tech companies, the government. I think you should ask questions and be informed and seek out alternative viewpoints. And when it comes to just a firm belief in reliability, truth, ability, or strength, I don't know. I think when it comes to information itself and being educated about topics that may be of high stakes, that I don't know. I mean, I hate saying, on one hand, I would like to live in a world where I felt like I could encourage trust, because I feel like the lack of trust we have in our institutions right now is very damaging. Like, you know what I mean, Bill? I can see the damage that's done. On the other hand, I also think the positive flip side of that then could be that people start taking more responsibility for asking questions, being informed. And it's not that necessarily a lot of these institutions may have decreased in their reliability or truthfulness or accuracy over the years, but they probably always deserved a certain level of skepticism. And so, I think that's a positive that could come out of it. That said, what I will say about this anchor is, and again, Project Veritas, I don't know what the guy said before and after. They edited it this way, so I don't know if that was a fair representation. Right. But I do think, Bill, that there is a sense in journalism right now of sort of, I'm your parent and I just have to do this for you, even if you don't like it. And I think that attitude of like, I just don't care if you trust me, is kind of the same way a parent's like, I don't care if you like me. You're still going to timeout. I'm still going to make you eat your broccoli, and I don't care if you like it. That was what I felt like that was coming out of that.
Yeah, I got that sense as well, but I'm a grown-ass man, okay? You ain't putting me in timeout for shit. And but that's... I don't want to get into a philosophical debate about trust, because that's another story for another time. People a lot smarter than me. But the base value of instilling the fact that you can trust me to bring you accurate news, I think that speaks to a lot of it when somebody says, hey, I don't care if you trust me to bring you fair or accurate news, or my company is giving out training that says we cannot be objective. Because, and again, I don't want to get into a philosophical debate. Well, what is objective? But just this, the whole lackadaisical approach that this video showed, and I 100% agree with you. It may have been, what's the word I'm looking for? Creatively edited. I agree with you on that. So I would like to see more context. I'd like to see it raw and uncut, but unfortunately we probably never will. But the way it was presented, it's very disheartening. And, news is, and journalism, nobody trusts them anyway. So if this guy doesn't care, then he's not even trying. Then why even have news?
Okay, Bill, can you hang out for a couple more minutes, or do you need to go? Because I was going to show this quick clip from this video of the training.
I do got to go. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Christy's here to take over.
Okay.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Christy.
There she is.
There's my husband.
There's her husband. Hi, husband. Do you want me to pull you out for a second, Christy, and I'll just play this and bring you back in, or are you good?
That's whatever you want to do. You're in
Okay.
charge.
All right. So everybody, if you don't know Christy, which you probably do already, 'cause she's been on the channel a bunch of times. She also used to be in TV news. Christy, what we were talking about is that I believe I covered this same training that Project Veritas is talking about in the video, because I had a friend pass it to me while they were still at Tegna. It's this like diversity, equity, and inclusion training, I believe. And I had Christian Watson on talking about it because he's a journalism student in college. And I was just curious what, he has his own YouTube channel, which if you're interested in this kind of topic, I would suggest going and checking out Christian. But so I actually played part of this and had him comment on it. And I figured I'd just play a quick snippet of it, because I think then you'll get a better idea. Again, I'm not totally sure if it's the same thing, but I believe that if it is not exactly the same training, it's similar to it, because this came from a Tegna station and it's on the exact same topic. So let's just listen to it real fast.
Hey, is this political end good or bad? So the foundation is always very important to me, but
since you bring that up, I went to the next slide just so I could read you their definition of diversity. The quality of being unique at the individual or group level, including but not limited to race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, age, ability, and religion.
Okay, so we understand where they're coming from. It's very, very obvious. They're basically, because safe spaces are attached with such a negative connotation these days, and they're basically trying to say, okay, look, no safe space. But let's be brave. But let's be brave only to be brave within these particular parameters. That's not brave. Bravery is about breaking and smashing every parameter possible. Do something that is actually courageous, something that is actually, beyond the ordinary. They're trying to basically take the ordinary, which is basically this particular political paradigm, ensnare people in this particular political paradigm, and then have them act within the paradigm with the illusion that they're actually doing something outside of the paradigm. So no, this is not at all anything brave. It's a revolution in the sense that a wheel revolves around its axis. That's all it is. It goes in a circle. And so on that alone, I'm not a fan of this. But a broken clock is right twice a day, right? It's right. You have to be willing. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable if you want to actually understand things. Now that's my language, not theirs. They say if you want to change things. What if we don't want to change things? So yeah, this is interesting. But
okay, so Christy, do you have any initial opening thoughts before I ask you some questions about all this?
Well, what's you mean as far as the big push on centering all things around these social justice issues? Is that what you mean?
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you just big picture. What did you think of the Project Veritas video? Bill and I were just talking about the focus on objectivity and trust. We had just finished talking about how the anchor was recorded saying that he doesn't care if people trust us or not. Maybe you could take it from there. What do you think about it? You were an anchor. What do you think about an anchor saying that?
That is very, very foolish. I'm surprised if he still has his job, because that has always been pushed in newsroom, that trust is so important, because obviously when you're giving your news to your audience, it is a bit of a relationship, and they need to be able to trust you first and foremost before it even matters what you're saying. And so we would run whole promotions on, basically why people should trust us. So that was shocking. The other thing that was shocking about it is I applied to go to an innovation summit at Tegna. You have to apply to be one of the thinkers of the group, if you will. And I actually got accepted to go to the innovation summit that was hosted by Tegna. And this was in April of 2019. So here we are in 2021, barely 2 years later, and none of what they were pushing in this video was being pushed on that scale when I went to this innovation summit. I actually went back and looked through my notes just to kind of refresh my memory of the things that we talked about. And the only time, like we'll say climate change and social justice issues, any of that was mentioned was when we're talking about target audiences and bringing in younger viewers, to engage them. And the only thing passing that was mentioned is, here are some of the things that the younger viewers are caring about: climate, social justice, equity, whatever. And that's fine. It was in the context of thinking about stories to seek to address topics that might interest your audience. So that was fine, but we didn't go into like making basically everything about that and looking through all of the lens of the stories in this manner. The other thing that really stuck out to me about this video is when they were talking about we need to think in terms of not really caring about objectivity. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what she was saying, was like, let's throw objectivity. They had on the screen behind them the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics. And I frequently go back to the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics, because when I am doing news analysis, I am comparing the way news is put out now to the Code of Ethics and showing you how they're not following it. So the very first thing they say in the SPJ Code of Ethics is seek truth and report it. And then it says ethical journalism should be accurate and fair. That's like literally the first sentence in the SPJ Code of Ethics. So if you're throwing objectivity, how are you going to have fairness? And then it says later in the Code of Ethics, support the open and civil exchange of views, even views they find repugnant. So if a code of ethics is to support the civil exchange of ideas, then it has to be objective, because you can't come from one angle. You can't be subjective, and you can't be supporting views that you may even find repugnant. And then it also goes on to say label advocacy and commentary. So to say that we're going to throw objectivity infers to me that everything's going to then become about your own commentary on that. And they say that you're supposed to label that. And then my favorite is in the SPJ Code of Ethics is expose unethical conduct in journalism, including within their own organizations. So our dear friend Whistleblower was just following the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics to expose unethical conduct within his own confines of the newsroom. So those were the big takeaways I took from that video.
Yes. So I have a question about objectivity, because I think we definitely seem to be, and maybe this is an aspect of postmodernism, I'm not quite sure, but we definitely seem to be at this juncture where, is there perhaps a benefit to people just admitting that we all come from a particular time and space and cultural context, and that we're influenced by that, and that thereby influences our reporting? Is there value to that? In other words, like admitting nobody reports in a vacuum? Or do you feel like this is taking it too far and it's more than just that? It's like basically excusing bias and saying, even not just excusing it, but promoting it and saying, hey, actually, you know what? Use it to your benefit, instead of the opposite, which I think would be allowing for the fact that you admit it, but then using that to just make yourself more self-critical and self-aware of your blind spots.
Well, I think that's inferred. I mean, it's like the classic case of like, if any journalist or reporter from any organization tells you that they're not biased, well, then you can't trust them. Because I think that we start with that, of course, we're going to have our personal biases, and we should admit that we have them. But is it apparent in your work? Is it apparent in your delivery of the news? And that's where the concern should be. So to me, this is more about excusing, like you said, excusing bias and saying like, okay, we're not only going to admit that we all have biases, but we're going to embrace them and actually make that part of our product. And I obviously think that is absurd. And if you care about earning trust back, which apparently that anchor did not care at all, then you should be transparent about who you are. Because again, if you're building a relationship, people can get hints of what kind of person you are, but they shouldn't be able to see that, how apparent that is in the traditional news medium, where you're just supposed to be reporting the facts. I think this also excuses the use of adjectives everywhere. I saw a huge increase of adjectives in the past couple of years in traditional media, and I think it's because they're basically excusing well, this is how I feel about it. And so I'm going to throw in an adjective to sensationalize my piece, maybe get more clicks. And it's accepted. So I don't know.
Okay, let me ask you about the trust part of it too, because before you joined, I was also talking about how I feel like on the positive side of things, I think news and many institutions really deserved far more skepticism and critical thinking. And I don't know really where I fall on the trust spectrum anymore. Like I was saying when Bill was on, I can see the damage that's been done with the breaking down of trust in our institutions, like the justice system, for instance, the electoral system, the health system, the public health system, and I do worry about what happens if you break it down. Or, I mean, I guess we're already starting to see it, but you break it to such a degree that I don't know, people are not listening at all anymore. Like I just won't, even if you say something right, I won't even listen to you because it's that damaged. I can see really bad problems ahead in that way. At the same time, I guess I'm kind of encouraged that people would start saying, I distrust, and if what they're saying is, I want to be more informed myself. I want to take more responsibility for my own education and self-awareness, and I'm not going to just take as gospel whatever like my favorite corporate news outlet says. Like I feel like that's a good thing. And so I don't know if I would encourage someone to trust in that pure sense the news, just because I think it's a good thing when people ask questions and find different sources and don't, like I said, don't just take the authority as gospel without asking any questions about it. What I think this was just my read on that anchor. And again, qualifying it by saying, I don't know what he was specifically referencing when he made that statement. I don't know what happened before and after, but I do feel like if I'm hearing it correctly, it reminds me kind of this sentiment I've talked about many times, which is we are kind of like the parent figure. We're the gatekeeper. It's like this top down way of looking at the public. And we don't care if you like it or not. I saw that a lot under the Trump administration, that it was like this, well, we don't care if you think we're fake news. We don't care if you don't like us. We're going to stick to it. I remember even showing this video that I believe it was another Tegna station actually, where an anchor, no, it was the news director. The news director actually did a video speaking directly to the viewer saying, you know what, if you don't like it, sorry, we still got to do our job. Because I feel like there is this sentiment that trust is, and that I guess the inverse of that, the fake news sentiment, the we don't like you sentiment, it almost encourages some journalists, or many, to think that they're being the good parent. They're being the good parent who is just giving you broccoli. And if you don't like it, sorry, but this is what's best for you. I'm curious what you think about that.
I think we're talking about two different things, really, because if the goal is trust, that's different than pandering. So that's how I'm thinking of it. If you're trying to just earn trust, then to me that's pandering. But if you're earning trust by doing your job, which would mean giving your sources, giving both sides, holding those in power accountable, that's what's going to earn trust. Not just I guess, trust me, because of this or that. Like, to me, that would be pandering. Trust is earned if you are truly following the tenets of journalism and sharing both sides and speaking to others, perhaps, that other media figures won't speak to. And again, giving your sources. I think that's the big key. I saw a lot of stories out that were not giving sources. And I would have to ask myself, okay, is this according to Christine Frizzell from Sinclair? Because I don't see a source here. And so if you're giving sources, that encourages the viewer to then go ahead and check what you said. is this really what this agency said? Is this really what this person said? That actually encourages some involvement from the viewer if they want to check and see if they can trust you, if you have in fact listed sources. If you have people like I saw, not to call her out, but that's the one that's off the top of my mind, Christine Frizzou, who's just putting statements with no according to or so-and-so says, then it's like, well, who are you? You're acting as the authority. You're saying, just listen to me. I'm not going to tell you where I'm getting this information. Just trust me. You know, I mean, and that's not okay. That's not okay. Trust should be earned.
Okay. When I was playing that Christian Watson video, could you hear it?
What he was saying about the class lesson. Yeah, I could hear what he said.
Okay. All right. Just making sure, because I didn't know if I needed to play that again, because the audio was not clicked off. Okay. So you heard what about the inclusion training and the safe spaces and all that stuff. You heard him. Okay. All right. Yes. And Bob Whittlefish, Christian Watson is awesome. Thanks for introducing us to him. Yeah, he's great. And he's finishing up college. So he's probably going to have a lot more content coming up in the future. And he's also a philosophy major too. So he's an interesting student to follow. And I was glad to be able to ask him about that training. Let me ask you this. What do you call this, Christy? On record versus what's the opposite of that? Somebody asks.
If it's not on record, off the record, is that what the person's referring to?
Yeah. So I'm curious how, just because this may be interesting for people, how do you think Project Veritas's line of TV news whistleblowers is going to affect the way things are done at TV news stations? Because I wondered after Ivory Hecker and then April, I think Moss was her last name. Those were sort of back-to-back on-air people. This guy was a promotions staffer. Do you think they see this and they're like, we should be more careful about what's going on, or like our
I don't know, you would think, but like I just feel like there's so many arrogant personalities honestly in the field that I don't think that they even think that's happening. And you and I know how busy the news day is and the day turns and everything. I don't think that they're necessarily thinking about like, well, what if somebody's recording me? Everybody's too busy for that. But I think that this also, I mean, since you brought it up, you talked about the whole like fake news, and I felt like that made a lot of journalists be defensive because it did kind of start to turn a tide and people being against media. Oh, well, I don't trust news. It's all fake anyways, fake news. But it's interesting as more and more is coming out with this Durham report and how fake phony all that was. It's like they created the monster, you know? So you had the president at that time saying fake news, but how much of his abrasiveness, which no one can deny, how much of that abrasiveness and that repetitious of almost making the media enemy was brought on by themselves, like was brought on by them not doing their due diligence to try and seek out both sides. There were other people that could have been talked to. Devin Nunes and Kash Patel, they were sounding the alarm years ago. And how many of those media organizations did you see getting that side? No, they were all too comfortable to say, according to an anonymous source, or maybe no source at all. So they perpetrated this lie. It's coming out more and more just how fake and phony that story was and how thinly veiled it was and how it was based on lies and rumors. And so it's like journalists got defensive about the whole fake news and how abrasive sometimes the former president was, but did they create that beast? How different of a president would he have been if they hadn't come and pushed this lie so hard?
Look into local coverage of former Seattle Mayor Ed Murray. Cairo Como Q13 weren't exactly beating down the door to investigate him. I just had Brandy Cruz on, if you're interested. She was the political reporter for Q13, and she just quit and talked about how she felt like she couldn't both work for the corporate news and work for the people. So go to my channel and check out the video with her, because I think it's very informative if you're interested in somebody specifically with a Seattle Pacific Northwest perspective, because as she and I talked about in that video, a question asked in Seattle could be total pandering, but the same question asked in like Alabama could be holding the powerful accountable. And when it comes to local news, it's really contextual. And so what she was saying was like some of this sort of wokeness in journalism may actually not be serving the people at the bottom of the food chain, as it were, at all. It may actually be supporting the power elite, depending on the community that you're in. And that's actually something that Batya Unger Sargon, she is the deputy opinion editor at Newsweek, and she just wrote this book, Bad News: How Woke Media is Undermining Democracy. I'm just going to play this real fast so you can hear a little bit of what she had to say, and then we can talk about it. Where they can read more.
Thank you so much.
Tell me, if you were to sum up how woke media, we kind of already described what woke media is, but when you say undermining democracy, what do you mean by that?
What I mean is that our entire media ecosystem is happening at the level of the elites. You have the top 10% of liberals arguing with the top 5% of conservatives, and 90% of Americans don't have a political system that's catering to their interests or a media system that's talking to them or about them. And essentially what's happened is there's been a radical deplatforming of working class voices and agenda from the liberal media, to where the top 10% of liberals are now all producing all of the media for each other, talking to themselves. And I argue that it's undermining democracy because there's no longer a countervailing force pushing back against the power of the elites. They have sort of taken over all of the institutions that are supposed to represent all Americans. And as a result of that, there is just all of the power has now been concentrated in the top 10%. And that is really dangerous for a democracy. That's not a democracy, that's an oligarchy, right? Like you hear this in like, just you turn on CNN, turn on MSNBC, they call all Republicans white supremacists. They say anybody who is pro-life doesn't really have the right to vote because they don't believe in rights for women. There's like a lot of talk in which they betray that they really believe people they disagree with should not have political power, should not have political say. And we know already that the economy is not working for the bottom, the middle class, the downwardly mobile lower classes. So that's why I argue that it's actually undermining democracy, because so much power has been concentrated in such a tiny elite that we really are no longer a country that's run by people who believe that everybody has a say.
Any thoughts on that, Christy?
Well, I agree 100%. And I really resent that everything's come down to R versus D, red versus blue, Trump versus whatever, everyone. I know that people in independent media vastly get accused of being right-wing conspiracy theorists. Just as a group, it's like the most extreme. And so what I try and bring it back to is I don't find it to be R versus D. I find it to be elite versus the everyday man, And I think that it benefits the traditional news media to make everything about R versus D, to encourage the divisiveness, which encourages engagement in posts, which encourages more money, the almighty dollar. So I agree absolutely with what she said. It has very much become elite versus the majority, and so they're acting like they speak for everyone, and I think it's made all of these top 10% liberals, they're in an echo chamber and out of touch. And so how can they speak for the majority? How can they speak for the people if they're in their own little echo chambers and they're name calling anyone that doesn't agree with them? It definitely suppresses any kind of discourse, discussion, finding out where we as a society agree. And I wish more people would get a grasp of that, quit making it about just the parties, and really all recognize that we have a problem with democracy, like she said, because you have these over exaggerated, power hungry elite like taking over all of our systems.
One of the things that, to go back to the training itself, that Tegna is putting its staff through across the country, it's a similar training to a lot of corporate newsrooms are doing. And one of the pieces to it is they're saying safe space versus brave space and redefining it. And I don't know, just the sense I get from the way this is communicated to people is that there is a right way, an inclusive way, an equitable way to talk about a current event, and then there's the opposite. My concern is that when you go through this training, not only do you feel like you're going to be editorialized, but could you be even potentially punished in HR if you start coloring outside the lines on these topics in a way that wouldn't be considered, again, inclusive or equitable. And like we were saying earlier, again, what is that in one state versus another place? There may be, a bunch of white guys could be the ones that are not included at the table. If you're not able to ask questions about that, and you're being told specifically what the power structure looks like, as if that is a unanimous, homogenous structure, no matter where you live or where you're at school or what station you work for, and you don't contextualize that, you actually may be propping up the power structure and not doing that at all. I talk about my marriage, for instance, the fact that I grew up by a golf course with medical doctors as parents. I got a full scholarship to get my master's degree. My husband grew up in an entirely different household. He joins the military because he doesn't go to college, right? He still doesn't have a college degree. Hopefully the GI Bill will come through for him. The world has seen him, when he got out of the military trying to get a job. Well, you don't have a college degree, even though he was in special operations for 12 years. To look at the struggles he's had compared to mine, and to say, just because I'm a woman, I beat him on the oppression Olympic scale, would be factually inaccurate. I have had a way easier time. And that's what makes me concerned when you're telling journalists that this is the way you have to look at this, is that, well, what if I question that Allison, this is why people get in trouble when they push back on AOC. Like, well, you're criticizing a woman of color. How dare you? You're pushing back on somebody who has a lot of power in the government, and frankly, in society, right? Who has tons of followers on her many social media platforms. And I see that a lot when people push back on her. It's like the untouchables because of this exact kind of ideology. So
well, I mean, look at what's happening with Kamala Harris right now. She's getting
same thing.
And it's the instant response. Oh, it's sexism and racism, according to Jen Psaki. And so you're saying that we as a society elected a African-American female as the vice president, but we're still racist and sexist. That's why she's getting such low approval numbers. That's why those in some in the administration are going after her. It's all so extreme, and that's what it always comes back to, is just these extremist views. And I think you're absolutely correct when you cannot approach all of these issues in a homogenous way. Things are different in different areas, and that comes back to community. One of the cool things about local news, and what I've always said, is chances are you can trust your local news more than network, because they're in your community, they understand your community, hopefully, and it's in their vested interest to do what they can to improve the community. But then if you're putting as the owner at Tegna, let's say, like you said, just these blatant marks to achieve, blatant rules, whatever, however you want to say it, standards, then you're taking away the local community element of it. Mm-hmm. And oh, well, I have to meet these goals and standards, even if it's not what's best for my community, or even if it doesn't represent my community in the most accurate way. Right. And so, yeah, it's a dumb move. It's not going to be, it's going to continue to put us on this path of the destruction of true journalism. And again, so deceptive in that whistleblower video, to have a slide with the Society of Professional Journalism code of ethics behind it, and yet she's saying let's look at this differently, and we don't need to be objective all the time. It's like you're willfully deceiving. Perhaps the green reporter is eager to get out there and do something that they wish they could do, because that is nowhere in the Society of Professional Journalism, their code of ethics there, anything about throwing out objectivity.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's not R versus D, really. That's a scheme to keep us little people from uniting against the elite. Race,
Exactly.
religion, vaccination status, etc. We're easier to rule if we're ignorant and confused and divided. And this is interesting. I have friends that like the silencing, the government control, etc. From talking to them, it's all based on anxiety and fear. Fear is a motivator. And I totally agree with that. You know, what I tell people who are kind of still in that mindset, including peers who are still in the journalism world, is to try to ask questions so that they have to admit that there are previous and in many cases significant mistakes that have been made. And so if you're going to give that kind of power to a corporation, whether it's Google, YouTube, or Tegna, NBC, whatever, then you're basically saying that even if they're making a mistake and I should have seen that, I would still rather that, even if it could be life-saving information. And so I try to at least get to a level of admission where we can say, listen, if you had a perfect track record, then maybe we could have a conversation about you're actually being the gatekeeper that you say you should be to protect all of us. But the problem is, if we go back in time, we look at the government's track record, the FDA, for instance, track record of things that it's allowed on the market that have since been recalled and have been very damaging to people, corporate news talking points that have been wrong and grossly wrong, that have led us into conflicts overseas, for instance, or significant problems at home, then I think to give them the power to be the ones to determine what we're allowed to hear becomes a little bit more of a daunting gift, to give them. So that's what I say to people. I don't know about you, Christy.
It's frustrating. It's mind blowing that any journalist would cheer on censorship, whether it's a private company or not. So the bottom line is, a lot of these social media platforms are today's public square. It's how people are communicating. And if we're truly for freedom of the press, freedom of speech, as any journalist should be, then we should address this issue, and also in the context of conflicts of interest. Also, part of a code of ethics of journalists are to examine conflicts of interest and also motivations. How much are journalists anywhere truly examining the conflicts of interest, the tangled web between big tech and big pharma, and how they can pay each other's bills? And that's what we should be seeing from true journalists, is examining those conflicts of interest and the reason to ask more questions of these situations. But we're not seeing that. We're being starved from that, and in fact, you get shut down even for bringing it up. I mean, the latest case right now is you cannot sue because of when Reagan was in office. You cannot sue any of these vaccine companies. There is a specific court for that, but it's been specifically put in writing that as far as the COVID-19 goes, you cannot sue for that, any of those particular vaccinations. So there is an attorney, I think that you've probably seen this, that is, since he cannot sue the vaccine companies, is suing the FDA. And in their response, they're asking the judge, give us time to release the data 55 years from now. And that's not a joke, and that's not a typo. They're like literally asking the federal judge to not release their data on the vaccines for another 55 years. I mean, this is something that's so glaringly obvious in the public interest for journalists to pursue and report, and it's not getting out there. It's like a blip on the radar screen.
Bill suggested we look at this. So somebody at MSNBC or some people made a little bit of a boo-boo. So let's discuss before we go. What do you make of the judge in the Rittenhouse trial banning MSNBC from the building earlier today because they were trying to follow jurors? So I'll bring that up real fast. This is a New York Post. I think this is a little off topic for us, but we might as well talk about it. Just came out.
It's timely.
The judge presiding over the KHOU Rittenhouse trial banned MSNBC from the courtroom on Thursday after a man claiming to be a producer for the network was accused of following jurors. The man, who identified himself as James Morrison, was pulled over Wednesday after he allegedly blew a red light while pursuing a bus that transports jurors. He stated he had been instructed by a superior in New York to follow the jury bus. Police suspect this person was trying to photograph jurors. The incident is being investigated further. The judge called it an extremely serious matter and barred any journalist from MSNBC from attending the ongoing trial. Okay, well, interesting. I will say, having worked in national news, there is a lot of competition to get somebody first when there's an event like this. And they're often reamed for not being the person who gets that. And so I think a lot of people lose their humanity and brains, frankly, in this booking game, because you're just going from one event to the next. And it's like, you forget that these are real people with real lives. This is a real outcome. This is going to affect people's lives forever. And so maybe follow the rules in this one and don't be the first, or don't necessarily, jump the gun on all of this. I don't know. I've seen this happen even in local news, Christy. There were times where it's just like, don't come home without it, and you're like, but I'm going to be a total a-hole if I try to get this person right now, knocking on someone's door who's had the worst possible day of their lives and trying to force them to go on television. Did you ever have moments like that where you're just like, I just can't. I just cannot, even though.
Oh, yeah. It was super cringy to have to go up to doors, especially people that had a traumatic experience. And then you're going up, you feel like such a jerk to knock on their doors. But I think you said something important about humanity and holding true humanity. And I would always remind myself, well, what good can I do in the situation? Obviously, I have an obligation in my job to try and get an interview, but what can I do as a human being above that? And oftentimes it would be rewarding just to put humanity first. One particular case was covering a trial where a mother was in the courtroom for the sentencing of the boyfriend that had killed her daughter. And all of the other stations were trying to get to talk to the mother. She'd had an outburst and screaming, actually lunged at the offender in the courtroom. And as soon as we got out of the courtroom, of course, the other reporters came at her, like, aren't you angry? Don't you want to talk? And trying to get that interview first. And I kind of just hung back and was observing. And she was like, go away, shooed them away. And I just kind of was hung back, and I caught, they gave up, they left. And I caught eyes with her with no intention other just compassion. And I just kind of mouthed like, I'm so sorry. And then she called me over and I was like, do you mind if I give you a hug? And I wasn't even thinking about the story at this time. But I did have to ask her before I left. I was like, you don't have to. I know this, can't even imagine how what the emotional toll you just went through. I'm like, but I have to ask you, do you want to talk about it? You don't have to. Do you want to talk about this whole experience? And she's like, you know what? I do want to talk about it. So I was the only one that got that interview. And it was because in my mind, I put humanity first and was like willing to give it up to show compassion to another human being. In this case, if the producer was following jurors and has been following this story, they know that there's been plenty of talk about death threats, how contentious this is. So not only did they check their humanity at the door, but their common sense at the door if they were trying to follow jurors when they know it's already been in the news that there's been attempts to dox the jurors. So that was a stupid part on the producer's play or photographer, whoever it was. And so, I mean, you reap what you sow, in my opinion. The safety and the integrity of the court case comes first.
Casey Jones said that we should call the podcast Dark Stories because you guys are full of dark stories.
Well,
you don't know the half of it.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's true though. I think, you know, big picture, I don't know if this necessarily relates directly back to the Project Veritas expose, but it is easy if you're not regularly asking yourself questions about your own blind spots, and you're not, I don't know if it's like what you would call it, just being able to detach yourself from the job and the ego that can be promoted in the job. It does easily start to turn you into a caricature where every day is just a story and not an event of real consequence, where you may move on to something different the next day, but the people that you're reporting on will live with what you did forever potentially. And I tried to remember that, but there were days where I've been honest on some of my videos where, you know, it's like, oh, we just get this press release, we read it because it's just came out from the Department of Health, and so we're reading it at 11 o'clock without saying, well, wait a second, what would be the Department of Health's vested interest in pushing this message? What about the person they're talking about? Do they have another side of the story? Just get it on 11, just get it on 11. And I think the system sometimes, with the way that it's set up, with just the deadlines and being first, the competition, and making sure you have what your competitor has, can turn reporters, I think, into a robot that does not have that sense of empathy or curiosity or self-awareness that is necessary for journalism. So I don't know. I don't really have a whole lot else to add. Chris, do you have anything else before we go?
I just as you were talking, it's just funny because how many times did you hear, and working in a newsroom, is it more important to be first or to be accurate?
Right.
And like they would
Right.
say that all the time. And so you'd be
First.
like, accurate is what you would say, and that's the right answer. But it wasn't an environment that embraced what they were trying to tell you was the right answer. They would tell you
Yeah.
that, and they'd be like, yep, it's more important to be accurate. But you would get treated poorly if you didn't get out there and get it first.
Yeah.
So
Totally. Yep, that's true. Yeah, everybody knew deep down that it was like, yeah, I mean, yeah, accuracy matters, but you know you want us to be first. So there you go.
right.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for watching. Thanks, Christy, for joining, and Bill, he's not here, but thanks, Bill, for for participating too. We'll see you guys next time.
All right. Thanks, Allison.